Welcome to your Colorado River Watch update, where we cover the basin states, reservoirs, water supply, and more. In this very special first episode, we have forecasts showing Lake Mead dropping to new lows in 2025. Then, a small group of farms in California that use more river water than entire cities. And finally, we'll look at why a water district all the way upstream in Colorado is looking to remove natural grass just like Las Vegas did here in the desert. Today on your first Colorado River Watch update. So let's get right into this first story here, and I know this one is going to have a lot of you down in the comments scratching your head just like me. Lake Mead dropping to new low in 2025, projections show. A month ago, predictions for Lake Mead's future were reassuring. Now the federal government is forecasting the lake will drop to a new low in less than 2 years. A most probable report released Wednesday by the USBR predicts the lake will be down to 1,040 feet in September 2025. That's nearly a foot lower than Lake Mead was on July 27, 2022 last year, and the lowest the lake has been since it was filled in the 1930s. And what I find most interesting about this, I know some of you will remember from the June update just a few months ago, the USBR had released a 24-month study showing Lake Mead climbing to 1,070 feet above sea level by February 2024. If we look at Lake Mead's graph, we can see we're almost at 1,070 feet already this year. And that's before the predicted El Nino by many news outlets. But now, instead of rising 10 feet, where it was around June 2021, it's predicted to drop 20 feet down to where it was around June 2022. Even with widespread reports that another El Nino could be on the way. So now we have conflicting reports from water managers within a few months of each other, and we're going to find out why in just a minute. And here's the actual report. Like always, I'm going to leave all my links down in the description below. So if you want to see any of these news stories or follow any of these links to read the 24-month study here, just look down in the description there. So is it time for doom and gloom? Maybe not. Sounds pretty decisive. It appears that reclamation plans to hold that water in Lake Powell instead, just like they did back in 2022 when we saw the lowest levels at Lake Mead. Despite some suggestions that the government should pull the plug on the Glen Canyon Dam and just keep the water in Lake Mead, it looks like the opposite is happening. So this is something to definitely keep in mind if we do see Lake Mead drop to all-time lows again. It's not only due to the weather, but it's also largely due to how the USBR is managing the water between Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And it goes on to say about Lake Powell, the 24-month study now shows that Powell will climb from its current 3,572 foot level to 3,582 feet in September 2024, and shooting all the way up to 3,598 feet in September 2025. On Lake Powell's graph, you can see it's predicted to rise to 3,598 feet, which is off this chart right here, higher than it's been the last 3 years. Which isn't a coincidence that Lake Mead is predicted to drop to a new all-time low at that same time. The reason for the higher levels at Lake Powell isn't explained in the report, but I have a feeling it could be correlated to the predicted low levels at Lake Mead. Last year, concerns over power production at Glen Canyon Dam grew as the lake neared the point where penstocks, water intakes for turbines, were nearer and nearer to the lake's surface. Reclamation warned that infrastructure could be damaged if the water level went too low, something that we've discussed thoroughly in previous updates. So emergency decisions were made to hold back water from Lake Mead and increase releases from dams upstream from Lake Powell. But don't forget that came with a kicker, because when they did this, they actually accounted for that water as if it was in Lake Mead, which prevented a Tier 2B water shortage from going into effect, which is something that's kind of tricky and controversial and perhaps they shouldn't have done, but it does seem like maybe they're planning on doing it again here. The 24-month study is updated every month as conditions change. It's an important part of the decisions on how reclamation manages the dams that control the flow of the Colorado River. And this is why it seems these reports can vary so drastically from month to month like we just saw, because they can only really predict for about 2 months out here. And here's another important takeaway from this article. Entitlements to shares of the river add up to more water than what actually flows down the Colorado each year, a fact acknowledged by Reclamation Director Camille Touton. The winter took some pressure off politically charged negotiations over the river's future, but climate change isn't going away, conservationists warn. And it certainly seems like that's going to hold true this winter too, El Nino or not. What I find most interesting about this is now we have these two reports, each within 2 months of each other. One shows Lake Mead rising 10 feet, the other shows it dropping 20 feet to new all-time lows. So we're going to be able to look next year and then the year after that by September 2025, and we're going to be able to compare these reports and see perhaps if one was more accurate than the other, if they were both wrong, or if the USBR really just can't predict more than 2 months out due to there just being too many factors between the river and the weather and everything. Moving on to our next story today, we have a small group of farms in California that use more water than entire cities, and it's mostly going to a single crop, a new report finds. An investigation from ProPublica and the Desert Sun found that one farming region in Southern California, the Imperial Valley to be specific, was using more water than the rest of the entire state. The investigation also found that most of the water in the valley was being used by just 20 farming families. In addition, most of those farms were found to use the bulk of the water to grow just one crop, hay, or alfalfa. This is something we've also covered in depth, but going on just outside Phoenix in Arizona. A small group in Imperial Valley soaks up billions of gallons. Hay is an especially water-thirsty crop because of its deep roots, long growing season, and dense vegetation. The Salt Lake Tribune reported that Utah's 9,300 hay operations devoured most of the state's water resources. For their investigation, reporters at ProPublica and the Desert Sun estimated the water consumption of farming families in the Imperial Valley by combining satellite data with records of who owned and farmed each field. The reporters calculated that the family with the thirstiest farm used more than 84 billion gallons in 2022, which is more than the city of Las Vegas and about 3% of the Colorado River's entire flow to this region. Aside from using exorbitant amounts of water compared with the rest of California, the report found the families were exporting a significant portion of the hay outside the valley. Critics told outlets that exporting that hay was basically the same as exporting billions of gallons of valuable water away from drought-ridden regions that need it the most. And of course, next you're going to ask, well, where's the hay going? Hay is mainly used to feed livestock and is reported to produce between 11 to 20% of greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, the incentive to keep growing water-thirsty hay to continue supporting greenhouse gas-emitting livestock will probably continue if changes aren't made to the cost of water. ProPublica reported that the Imperial Valley District got its water free from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which was then selling that water to farmers for cheap. Cheap water helps make growing hay in the Imperial Valley profitable. In an effort to reduce farms' water use, the Biden administration earlier this year allocated $125 million to help pay Colorado River farmers to stop farming and let their crops go dry. But farmers previously told Business Insider it wasn't enough money to stop them from growing. In other words, give me more cheese. The federal government has created initiatives to assist farmers who are willing to curb their water use by using new irrigation techniques such as using sprinklers instead of flooding fields. Other states have begun dealing with this reckoning too. Troy Waters, a fifth-generation Coloradan farmer, previously told Business Insider that he was doing his best to conserve water to save the river, but wished he saw similar efforts in California. Gosh damn, he said, independent farmers now are having to start thinking politically, and I'm not sure why they wouldn't have had to start with, and maybe that's why we're in this mess. So what do you all think about this article? We all know we need farmers to grow our food, but what if the farmers are growing product to export instead of for use domestically? And what happens when these farmers claim that they have more of a right to that water than the growing cities nearby? Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Moving on to the last story today, at the Colorado River's headwaters, there are questions about whether there's enough water for lawns. The western slope delivers 70% of the Colorado River water, so why do Aspen, Vail, Grand Junction, and others want to replace thirsty turf? First came the drought in 2002. Water officials verging on panic restricted outdoor water use. The drought was believed to be the most severe in 500 years. Fine, thought water officials as rain and snow resumed. We're off the hook for at least our lifetimes. In 2012 came another drought, one nearly identical in severity. More bad years followed in 2018 and 2021. The Eagle River normally chatters its way down the valley through Avon and to a confluence with the Colorado River near Glenwood Canyon. In those bad drought years, it sulked. The shallow water was hot enough to endanger fish. Colorado River flows have declined 20% since 2000. Having water rights now is not enough, and the future looks even hotter, and because of that heat, drier. In Vail, managers of the Eagle River Water and Sanitation District have decided they need more storage. They plan a 1,200 acre-foot reservoir near Minturn called Bolts Lake. At that capacity, this new reservoir will be the most cost-effective way to ensure resilience as this climate becomes more variable. With the reservoir, they hope to capture water during high runoff years for use in the district's service territory from Vail through Edwards, and this is something that seems like California still hasn't figured out. Demand reduction will be another tool of growing importance in a hotter, sometimes drier climate. Managers hope to reduce water demand in the district 5% by 2026, even as new housing, especially more affordable units, get built. That's 400 acre-feet per year. The most productive place to ring in these savings will be in water used for outdoor landscapes, which is what Las Vegas figured out very early on. Only 25% or even less of water applied to lawns returns to streams and rivers, compared with 95% of water used indoors. Roman's district, like other water utilities in Colorado, is targeting non-functional turf, once again much like Las Vegas did. Precise definitions vary, but non-functional generally refers to grasses that require large volumes of water to irrigate, but rarely see human feet, except when mowed. It is also described as aesthetic turf. 3 years ago, Eagle River Water began offering rebates of $1 per square foot to customers willing to replace thirsty lawns with landscapes that use less water. Using state aid, the district this year bumped up the incentive to $2. We are not saying it needs to be stoned and look like Arizona, Roman said. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I happen to very much enjoy the desert landscape. Directors of the district in October also agreed to new tiered rates that will discourage high volume consumption. And this is once again yet another thing that we saw in Las Vegas that I covered just a few updates ago. And there's a lot more to this article. I'm going to leave a link down below in the description if you want to read through it, but we're going to get to the highlights here. It's important that we look at these types of things across the Colorado River Basin. We would want people in California and Arizona and Nevada to be looking at these types of programs too. I think it makes sense for a place like Montrose County to be conserving water as much as we can too. But, he added, this is one part of a very complex issue. And like I've described also, it doesn't really matter what Colorado is doing upstream if everyone downstream isn't doing their part, especially at the very end of the river. The takeaway, she said, is that communities can have vibrant landscapes and protect property values and still use less water. And it's pretty interesting to see communities way upstream in Colorado implementing some restrictions on water use and landscaping that perhaps some users in the lower basin still haven't even done yet. So, what's your takeaway on all this? As always, let us know what you think about these stories in the comments below. And if you find this content interesting or learned something of value here today, please give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more. Stay hydrated, stay happy out there, and we'll see you next time.